Hi, everyone. We're here with Jasmine Grace Marino. She's a survivor of human trafficking, and this is the first of hopefully many interviews that we're going to do with survivors, because Cycling for Change, we really want to support survivors in their full capacity, from rescuing to healing to just restoration. And one of the big ways we want to do it is just by helping tell their stories and letting people know, like, everyone has a story and everyone's story is so unique. And just want to say hello, welcome you. And I hope that by sharing your story, we get a chance to talk about your book, but more than anything, we get to talk about the issue of human trafficking and how important it is for listeners to get a real personal sense of what the journey is like before, during, and after. So let's just dive right in. Jasmine, welcome to my little interview podcast from Cycling for Change. And I'm so glad to have you. Tell us, a little bit about your story, and whenever you feel in the process of telling, if you wouldn't mind reading a little excerpt from your book, we'd love that too.
Yeah, sure. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm grateful that your organization is interested in giving survivors a voice and hearing our stories. It really is a big, important part of the anti-trafficking movement. So I'm grateful to be a part of that. And my story is definitely messy and hard and complicated, but the recovery is beautiful. Well, hard and messy too, but just not hard and messy as the trafficking piece, of course. But it's just the vulnerability that I came with, being a young girl, not really having any role models or good, safe, supportive, healthy people in my life, barely vulnerable, looking for love and attention. And I was young and naive, and I fell into a situation that was something way bigger than I could ever imagine. And I never, ever imagined that that would have turned into my life, that I would be prostituted, that I would have a trafficker, that I would be under his thumb for 5 years, and that upon exiting that life, I would get addicted to drugs as a way to cope with all the trauma that I had been through. I never would have imagined that was my life. I went to high school and got my cosmetology license, and I was in community college. I had plans, I had goals, but unfortunately fell into that life, which is very complicated. And people who don't understand trafficking say, well, how do you just fall into that life? Well, it's very complicated and manipulative and brainwashing, and it's a process. Someone doesn't just wake up and decide, oh, I want to prostitute myself today. Like, that is not how it works. And so maybe to understand, and since we don't have a ton of time for me to share my story, I will read a passage from the book, because the book is based on all my journal entries from when I was trafficked. Right? So I had tons of unhealthy coping skills. I did tons of horrible things to cope with the trauma that I was going through. But one good, healthy thing I managed to do was write in my notebook. And I would save those notebooks in a place where he couldn't find them. I'd hide them away. And it was just a place where I dump everything that was going through emotionally and mentally on these pages. And then years later, after I exited, I knew, then I knew I was a survivor, and all this healing and everything came. I knew I wanted to write a book. I actually went to college for journalism. So I always liked writing. It was always a thing I loved to do. And so it's really redemptive and cool that I was able to now be in a place to have a story to tell, right? And so I felt really led to write the book, and went back into those old journal entries and started a blog and just started writing the exact thing that was in those journals. Then a present day reflection to show people there's hope and there's change. And I didn't want to leave people depressed and hopeless. So the present day reflection to give a little bit of hope and let people know that women do recover, and how they can play a role if they're not survivors in helping that happen. So that's what the book is based on. So I'll just read a little excerpt from.
Just before you read, how far into your journey were you when this particular entry that you're reading? About how many years? Or
Yeah, so it's dated July 7th, 2002. So let's see. I think I met my trafficker in 1999.
Okay.
And yeah, the first entry actually in the book is 2000. So 2 years after I started journaling anyway. And I'm going to bleep out the bad words. I just don't even feel comfortable saying them. And there's tons of them in this one. So, okay, I'm heated. What the F? Once again, B, that was the name I gave my trafficker in the book. B has disappointed me. That mother bleeping hasn't slept home in 3 nights. Not 1, not 2, not 3. Okay, so July 4th, I left him at the party because it was late and I had to wake up in the morning, but he was also ignoring me all day. And those 2 phony bitches from DC were there, so I was all set. Then he tells me he'll be home, and he never shows up. Then the next day, Friday, I go to work. He says, "Are you aggravated with me?" And I say, "Yes." So then he says, "Can I take you out on Sunday to make it up to you?" "Yeah, okay," I said. And then Friday night, I come home, and he says, "I'll see you later," and he never comes. Saturday, he calls me while I'm at work, and he says, "Hey, I got something for you when you come home." I come home, and does he have anything? No. He comes home and takes the trap, meaning the money, and the keys to the truck, and he gives me some kisses while I'm asleep and then leaves. So hello, hello, hello. He thinks he can say sweet things to me for all the effed up shit he does. And then I come home on Friday night and I saw all the hair in my bathroom, and I knew those chicks were here, so I didn't ask him. And the chicks were, and he says no, he lied. And so Dougie, Big, and Big's chicks were here. So I said, "The white chick was with Big?" And he said, "Yes." And I know he's a liar. I said again, "So the chicks weren't here?" And he said, "No, Jazz, why?" I said, "Because they made a mess and I want to know who it was." And he said, "Bye, Jazz." And he hung up on me. So what the F was that? Get caught in a lie or something? I effing hate him. I really do. He's such a liar, and he tells me whatever he wants me to hear, regardless if it's the truth or not, and he's full of shit. My family was having a barbecue yesterday. I wanted to leave work at 4 to go, but since he was acting like I missed my chance to leave. So I had to stay in the whorehouse all day, but he does whatever he wants and whatever he pleases. Yeah, okay, F that. Why do I have to suffer? I don't get it. I give up. So I know that's just a small piece, but can you hear the back and forth, the manipulation, it's almost like domestic violence, but on steroids, right? So these are the mind games and things that he would play with me.
Right.
And so for people who don't understand, when I say work, I mean, that's when I worked at a massage parlor. He sent me to work in Connecticut, and then from there to a massage parlor in Kittery, Maine. And then once that place got busted, that's when the internet became really popular, and he started posting ads of me on Craigslist and other adult escorting websites.
Wow. Thanks so much for reading that and just giving us a little window into what your world was like. And I know you mentioned this a little bit at the beginning about having some things lacking in your life as a young girl. I often ask people when I meet them for the first time, trying to get past the chit chat and small talk. I like to ask people what are they looking for in life? And I'm thinking your answer might have been different back then than it is now. And what would you have answered back then, and what would you say now?
I mean, back then for sure, I was just looking. I was 19, right, when I met my trafficker. And again, coming from vulnerability, coming from a place with 2 parents who really didn't invest in me emotionally. I was looking for love. I was looking for attention. And I think every human, I mean, this probably is scientific. Humans need love, attention, affection, right? That's what we're created for, a community. I know that for sure. So it's I was just looking for a belonging. I was looking for someone to love and accept me. And so at this point in my recovery, I mean, I'll be 40 actually in a couple weeks. I've found that love and acceptance. I found that contentment, that peace that I've always was searching for in my faith and in recovery. So I don't even know, maybe if I had known my identity and if I had known my self-worth and who I was in Christ as a kid or growing up as a teen, maybe I wouldn't have been searching for it so hard in a human. But yeah.
Okay. I noticed when I was reading your book, you have it you definitely do a ton of reflecting on your past, choices that were forced on you, patterns, and then you talk about patterns and outcomes that made sense to you later in life. When you think about that young girl, do you think about her as someone you used to know? How do you look at that girl and what would you say is your, like, I guess what I'm thinking about is just perspective in terms of then and now, in terms of how you looked at yourself.
Yeah, I mean, how do I look at her now? It's like, I feel bad. I feel bad that she was just so lost, and it feels weird speaking like as third person. I mean, because obviously it was me, but I'll tell you, just lost and empty and very naive, and thinking that I did have all the answers, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Thinking I could handle things, thinking I could, just wasn't possible.
I guess I'm also wondering, like, at what point in your journey were you able to just look back and actually love yourself for even all the things you've been through? I think, when I think about my own past, I mean, just whenever we have some kind of, trauma or just terrible things that have happened to us, or even if part of that was, if there was any part of it was our own choice, or we, at any point, there's always a sense of like, there's a point at some point we have to forgive ourselves, and we have to accept the past and love that person for what they went through. What was that process like for you? And maybe you're still going through it.
I would definitely say, so once I finally got out, I exited from him, and then I got addicted to drugs as a way to cope.
Yeah.
Not knowing that I was going to get addicted. I mean, again, you don't just wake up and say, oh, I want to be a drug addict either. But once that whole thing happened and I finally got clean and sober, it took me a long time to do that. But once I finally got it, I got clean and sober, and I walked away from that life of prostitution completely and started out my recovery journey. Once you're sober and you can't use drugs as a way to cope, I mean, you have to learn all types of new things: boundaries, coping skills, how to be in a healthy relationship, how to even function as a normal member of society. It was really hard, and that takes a lot of work. And for the first 5 years of recovery, that's all I did, was work on myself, get sober, go to counseling, have good, safe, supportive people around me. But I did not know I was a survivor. I still, I stuffed that piece really deep down inside because it was way too powerful of emotion, too shameful to look at. And I still believed all those lies about myself that my trafficker and that life tells you: you're no good, you're dirty, no one will love you, no one will marry you. So I just shoved it. And then I got married in those 5 years of recovery, and that's when everything came out. Because now I'm in a relationship with a man, and I feel very trapped, and I feel like he's triggering me every minute of the day, whether he knew it or not. And I just could not function in this relationship. And everything started coming out, and we separated. And in that separation, all the healing came. And the healing came, again, my faith plays a giant role in my recovery. And through this whole process, which is awesome and amazing, but too long to explain here, it's in the book, the healing came, and I no longer was a victim. Now I was a survivor. Someone told me I was a survivor, and the lens changed, right? So I stopped looking at life and interacting with everybody through a survivor lens. I stopped looking through the victim lens. And then I was empowered. Then I was encouraged. Everything changed. I was able to forgive myself through a whole process. Yeah. Years. That instant didn't happen where I forgave my trafficker. But as I journeyed on in my, being a survivor, in realizing why people become traffickers, why people become buyers, how I was manipulated and vulnerable, and why I became prostituted, all those things. After I went through all this learning process, I forgave my trafficker even. That's the thing. And a lot of people say, well, how do you forgive him? And it's like, I don't know, he's broken too, and again,
amazing.
Yeah, I can understand why he became the way he did. I can understand why men purchase sex. I can understand how young, vulnerable people get trafficked. And of course, I have greater compassion and empathy for people because I understand, that deep brokenness. Yeah. So yeah, it all comes with acceptance, but it's all a really long, hard process.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can only imagine. Another thing, thank you for sharing that. Another thing that I really thought was pretty thought-provoking in the book as I was reading was just the you would often end like a journal entry or a reflective entry with questions, and there's lots of questions throughout the book, and sometimes they're addressed to yourself, but very often they're addressed to the reader. If you could pick one or two of those questions that you really hope that when a reader just dives into your journey, that they make sure they don't walk away without answering, what questions would you hope that the reader would definitely address?
I mean, number one, I wrote the book for two reasons, right? One, for the victim survivor that's out there. I wanted them to get a hold of this book, and I wanted their eyes to be open, because so many women don't self-identify, right? So many women are out there in drug recovery rehabs and programs and AA, and even not. Some of them don't even have drug problems, and they're out there and they're not healed. Just like I was, right? For all those years, did not know I was a survivor because we don't talk about it as much, and etc. So I wanted them to read the book, and I wanted the light bulbs to go on, and I wanted them to realize they were survivors. So that was the one thing. And then for the non-survivors who've never been through this, I wanted them to be able to understand the mind of a victim, to understand, why does she keep going back? How did she get involved with this? Why didn't she just walk away? Why is it like domestic violence, but so much more intense, and so forth? And how does this happen to the girls next door, as well as those vulnerable kids that are in foster care, and so on? So that is the two main things. But also the deepest question was, again, and I always take it back to my faith, because I'm a believer and my Christianity plays such a deep role, I wanted people to walk away knowing the Lord. But I didn't want to also shove it in their face. I didn't want to, I just wanted a person who maybe walked away from faith, maybe never was introduced to the faith. But the whole purpose was also to glorify God in the whole thing, because that's my story. If I never found him, if I'd still be out there, if I haven't found the true rock of my recovery, and because of God's grace, I'm alive, well, I'm clean and sober. He gave me this ministry that he's, things that I've done, all this. And so that was really the most important question. Like, what is your faith? What's your spiritual, where's your spiritual compass? Like, where are you headed? Do you know? So that's really cool.
That's great. In fact, like, I think it's so true. Like, I think even for my own personal journey, it was hearing people's stories. That's what really drew me to God. Like hearing their own personal journey and seeing like what a difference God and Christ can make in a person's life, and how it's not just, fluff. It's so real, and it's so tangible. And I mean, we see it in your life. And speaking of the power of recovery in your life, and just the power of God's grace in your life, can you talk a little bit about what work you are involved in now, and just the Bags of Hope, which I think are so awesome, and just how that started, and what that looks like on a daily basis, I guess.
Yeah, sure. It's been so I've been out of the life in clean and sober for 13 years. It'll be 13 years this year. And so I think I've been doing the ministry work for maybe 7 or something, 6 or 7 years. And the way it all started was because I became healed. I found that I was a survivor, and I always had this desire in there to go back and help, whether it was giving haircuts to addicts in detox. I did that first as a way to volunteer before I knew I was a survivor. And then once I found I was a survivor, I was like, that's it. Okay, I got to help these ladies. I got to go back out there and tell them the truth. Tell them they're survivors, to help them, keep them out of that cycle of going into detox, not getting the healing they need, and going back out into bad relationships or back out onto the streets. So I started making these bags. I was real simple. I also wanted my kids to be involved. So I have 5 kids altogether, right? I'm remarried. My husband and I did separate, actually divorced. We remarried. That's a whole nother story, probably another book for Pete's sake. But so I wanted my kids to be involved. I wanted them to know how to give back and know a bit about my story, but in a redemptive way. Yeah. And so we started making these bags. We filled them with toiletries, right? Soap, shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, things that ladies need when they're out there, or when they're coming out of jail and going into a program. You have nothing. I wanted to give them a resource sheet so they would know there's a better way, you know, like, and this is real. The commercial sex trade is exploitive. And if you're being trafficked or forced into prostitution because you need to buy drugs or whatever, like, there is a better way. Like, I have all this knowledge now I need to share. So that's how I started Bags of Hope. And then it just blew up and people started wanting to give and fill the bags. And long story short, we give out over 1,000 bags a year to about 35 different programs around Massachusetts and New Hampshire, because I just moved to New Hampshire a couple years ago. I have one employee, a bunch of volunteers, women that have received the bags, found out they were survivors. Now they work with us. They share stories as survivor leaders, and they're empowered because they're getting paid to do that, which is awesome. We mentor ladies. We run groups at halfway houses and domestic violence shelters and jails, again, to help women self-identify, to give them good, healthy coping skills and strategies. I wrote the book in the middle time, somewhere in between all that. And I, you know, a lot of public speaking around the country, you know, pre-COVID, doing a lot of awareness and training and working with curriculums and people to write curriculums and nurses and healthcare. Oh my gosh, and just so many different aspects, because human trafficking doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? These victims are out there and they're touching all points of our society and culture. So schools, again, lawyers, laws, doctors, everywhere. How many places we've educated, done a lot of public awareness over the years. And for that, I'm so grateful.
That's just so awesome. Like, that's ridiculously amazing. I think I could see how that would be such a huge part of your healing too, because I think so often, like, we go through something and we're thinking, how, like, gosh, God, why me? Why did it happen? And then somehow years later, like, we find someone who's going through something similar, and we can really honestly say, you know, I know exactly what you're going through. And that alone, I think, opens up that door to even communicate with these women and girls and just people that you're reaching out to. And I love the Bags of Hope. It's such a simple and yet relevant and tangible way to love someone, and to invite them, you know, into that conversation of maybe the journey out, you know. I guess as we, you know, close up the interview, I'd love for you to read the entry that was reflective after, you know, the one you read earlier when we started the interview, and then maybe leave us with, because you've mentioned your faith quite a bit, and that's great. I mean, each person's healing is a different journey, and I love that faith is a huge part of your journey. And if you had a verse that you wanted to share that maybe you turn to over and over again for encouragement, I'd love for you to share that with us too.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let me
give us the date of the second entry.
Yep. Okay, so that is February 17th, 2015 is when I wrote the reflection.
So almost 13 years later.
Yeah. So I was 22-ish, or 21 when I wrote it. And then I was, wow. So what a difference so many years make, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's titled, What If? So do you know why selling young girls and women is more profitable than selling drugs? Think about the drug dealers. They need to purchase the product, sell it, and purchase more drugs or re-up. Now think about a trafficker. They don't have to re-up. They just continue to make a profit off the same product, which is a human being. When they have more than one victim, their profit increases and their investment decreases. What is feeding this vicious cycle? It's the demand for sex, the result of broken families and failed systems. Men were the buyers in my situation, and they are still noted as a majority interested in purchasing sex. What if healthy, safe men invested their time in teaching young boys to be gentlemen and respect girls? What if men were to rise up and become the defenders and protectors of young girls and women? Imagine if our world had just a few more dads who spent time with their daughters and reassured them of how much they are loved. What if healthy, safe women became mentors to young girls and modeled what healthy relationships look like? What if moms modeled confidence and respect for their bodies? would that show their daughters that self-worth comes from who they are, not just what their bodies look like? It'll take the whole community to be involved at various levels if we want to see modern day slavery come to an end. What are you doing?
Wow, and what a great question to leave with our listeners. What are we doing? Because if each person does something, I mean, the world could be so different, right? And was there a verse you wanted to share?
Yeah, sure. The one that came to me was a verse in Isaiah that I really loved when I found it, because I never knew it. And Isaiah is such an Old Testament book that, I don't know, you don't generally read. But this one really caught my attention, so I love it. So it's Isaiah 1:18. Come now, let us settle the matter, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red as crimson, they shall be like wool.
Oh, that's one of my favorites too, especially after like a fresh winter snow. I,
Ah,
I always think about that verse.
so
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, think of the purity. Think of just the, because that's how I felt, like so damaged and so gross and shameful, um, and stained. Yeah. And so to know that God did not see me that way and that I was covered and loved, it just brought so much wholeness and peace. Yeah.
And it's the truth. I love that the truth is spoken over your life, and I think the truth is so big in healing, the healing process. Well, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of Cycling for Change, for just your openness, for just your willingness to share your story, for just your candidness, and just also all the hope that you offer through your life story and the work you're doing now. Like, what a gift it is to all the women out there. Um, and I just want to let listeners know, like, this is just a little taste of Jasmine Grace's life. I think if you want to know more, and I hope you do, please pick up the book. It's available through her website, we're promoting it, Cycling for Change's website, and obviously at Amazon. You can get yourself a copy. And if you have the opportunity to, please contribute to her work that she's doing with these women as well. And you can, and all the information on the websites and links to the book, I'm going to add at the bottom of the interview and in the comments. So thank you again, and so appreciate just you and your openness and your story. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah. Raj, thanks so much for your heart and for doing this. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.